Black mask, I'm a nuisance, pound and a plan, trying to be Bruce Wayne. I ain't slowed down since about last May, cause this grind don't sleep and I dream all day. And I'm far from sane, cursed with a gift, my only saving grace. Firstborn son and they think I'm crazy, till the sky falls and they see my rain. First thing, they don't know about the vision, no wonder why there's all eyes on me. Came from a place where the grass ain't green, so the blood, sweat and tears really stain my tea. And I can't find sleep, always awake, guess it ain't that deep. Everywhere I go, I'm just counting sheep, so I gotta lead the way like little Bo Peep on the kid.
Women's football goes back further than some people may perhaps realise. Women's football emerged in the 1890s and the first recorded game was in 1895. In the decades that followed, the popularity of the game grew. One of the recorded matches in 1920 with the Dick Kerr ladies, the infamous team, was played at Goodison Park and 53,000 people watched that game inside the stadium. And there are also a number of individuals recorded outside watching in through the gates. So this history goes back quite far. What was most noticeable during this time period was during the First World War. At this time, women were invited to work in factories to replace the labour where men had gone to war. And factory teams would play against each other for morale during their breaks. Women's football became popular again during this period, with thousands of spectators during these lunchtime breaks watching the matches that happened. At this time, when the war finished and men returned to the country, the traditional visions of women had changed, but they were supposed to go back to their original roles as housewives. Post-war, women returned to their homes and their lives away from the factories. At this time, women still wanted to play organised football. However, the FA declared that the game was unsuitable for women. That was the phrase that they used. And so, as a result, they banned women's participation from organised football at affiliated grounds and in stadiums, and essentially pushed the game underground. This ban lasted for 50 years, and this is the most crucial time in women's football history because a lot of skills were lost during this time period.
Where the women's game was banned for 50 years, the men's game was free to expand and grow. Now the women's game and those involved are constantly faced with scrutiny, stereotypes, and abuse.
I think the stereotypes that are perceived in the women's game is that we can't play as quick as the men, we're not as strong as the men, we're not as fast as the men. Everything's compared to the men's game, and even though it's the same sport, it's like we can't compete with them.
I mean, I guess my very first experience was when I was about 9 or 10 years old at primary school. So I used to play like in the playground at lunchtimes with the boys. I used to play football every playtime, and they went and asked the school teacher, I think he was the deputy head, but he was the head of the boys football team, could I play in the school matches? And he was just like, no. And they were like, but sir, she's good, like why can't she play? And he was like, she's a girl. Like that was, and at that time, so that was like, I started secondary school in 94, so this would have been around 92, 93. It wasn't even a conversation. Like my little 10-year-old self didn't have the confidence to be like, hang on a minute, like that's sexist. That was just accepted as the answer, was no, she can't play because she's a girl. So that would have been like my very first experience really of sexism in football.
Always just having to prove myself before any of the guys would kind of include me, but also kind of thrived off that as well, being a little blondie, just like, and them underestimating me and just bursting past them and stuff. So yeah, it lit that fire inside a little bit too.
Yeah.
But it was more often the parents actually, just like little snarky comments from the sidelines, like, "Oh, don't get beaten by that girl," like, is unnecessary and just. But yeah, it's kind of undercover stuff. You don't necessarily pick up on it too much, but it does kind of wear you down occasionally, I think.
Yeah.
Main point with sexism in sport, I'd say, is that once you're no longer a child, the only way you can find sport is if you're at, professional level. So I think straight away that's a big, it's a big no-no. Boys don't stop playing football, but for some reason there's this bracket for girls where, I don't know, puberty, boys, parties, I don't know, but football is not a thing.
To be honest, I think there's a lot of reasons why women don't get more spotlight in sport. I think the statistics that came out recently say that of all coverage in sport, women are only 4%. And I think that was a global or American figure. To be honest, I'm a little bit more cynical and I'm coming at it from an outside view. I think a lot of it is just frankly sexism and how it manifests in different ways. People make a lot of assumptions around like what consumers want to see. And that is based on, sexist assumptions. The other thing I would say is, as well, I think at the moment, people are not really taking the growth of women's football seriously. It's the fastest growing women's sport in the UK. We know how popular the Women's World Cup was. FIFA had, record-breaking figures for people who tuned into the tournament. I think people are just not really up to date with how big it's actually got.
When you say why do women not get the spotlight, I think there needs to be like a distinguishment, because white women do get the spotlight. Not as much as men, but white women do get the spotlight. And black women and non-black women's achievements will be downplayed.
And it's constantly growing. But from my perspective, I think it's really important that we look at who does get profiled in women's football in particular, who is in the spotlight. And if you ask people who they recognise, who are the recognisable brands, there's a lot of similarities, and I don't necessarily always see myself or people who are similar to me represented in women's football. I think, talking as somebody who identifies as a black woman from mixed heritage, there are quite a lot of mixed race players who are getting more recognition, but there are very few dark-skinned black women who are on our screens talking about women's football, who are given the same profile that white players are getting. The other thing I would say is that there hasn't really been an intentional and deliberate piece of work that has tried to address diversity in women's football. And that covers not just race, I think that's to do with all characteristics. And until that happens, we're not really going to see like true representation of women's football. We might like clap and see one or two players that like might be on the front page or back page, so I should say, of sports in the newspaper, or might be given a really good slot on TV, but it's not going to be representative unless we actually take proper intentional action to make sure that all women feel like they're being recognised.
It's the same thing like with Naomi now, what's happening, and I've seen it, like I'm seeing it in real life, and it's mad. They're whitewashing her. As she is speaking out about black women and coming out as a black woman, I'm seeing threads about how she's tennis best player when Serena Williams is still playing. So it's like there's a whitewashing going on non-white women, and and I also think it's also, again, lack of opportunities. Like, there are so many sports that non-white women dominate if you look at grassroots, but if you look at people competing, they're not there. I mean, I think the best example I have in my head at the moment is surfing. I was reading the other day about how like surfing is such a massive part of Hawaiian culture, and how a lot of women had found ways of expressing themselves through the sport, and how for a lot of people Hawaiian women are the best, better than the men, but if you actually look at the people who are competing, you don't see many of them there.
These sexuality and sexism issues within women's sports is not exclusive to athletes and coaches alone. Unfortunately, this abuse stretches far beyond those on the field and infiltrates into those sectors behind the scenes as well.
I think the main thing holding women back in sport is 100% misogyny. People think that women are weaker, are not as powerful, not as athletic, and even though we prove that wrong time and time again, that doesn't mean that the sexism disappears, and it is a constant battle, and we're in 2020 and it shouldn't exist, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key word, isn't it? Misogyny. It's sexism on a base level.
Yeah.
No matter how intelligent or impressive or how much a woman has achieved, it seems a certain section of the public always seem to throw the fact of their gender back in their face.
Yeah.
And that has absolutely nothing to do with their achievements. It's more of an inspiration. Like they do it in spite of that. Like women are one of the most powerful things on this planet. I mean, all of us are here because of women.
Yeah, I think if anything, the fact that we fight the struggles so often proves that we are arguably the stronger gender, because we have to deal with more.
You find as well throughout history, any sort of section that is marginalised is through fear, and I think men fear strong women.
Stereotypes within the women's game. Definitely every girl that plays football is gay. Definitely if you play football you're butch, or you are like really hard and you can't be feminine. I think it kind of also comes down to that because you're sporty you can't be girly, you can't dress up, or you can't make an effort, or that you always surround yourself with boys, you don't like surround yourself with females a lot unless you're playing football. They're the ones that sort of jump to mind for me straight away, more so if you play football you're gay. But I know a lot of players who play women's football and aren't gay, so it kind of doesn't make sense, but I don't think people should jump straight to someone's sexuality based on what they do anyway, and as long as someone's happy with who they are and what they're doing and they're kind to people, you shouldn't judge someone's passion on their sexuality.
I think it's really important that we see more women on the broadcasting side, just because if you don't see something, you don't think that you can do it. So me starting out as a broadcaster, it was hard to find role models, especially Black women that were working in sports, and both finding broadcasters that work for women's sports, but also that talk about men's sports. That needs to be way more prevalent, and I think maybe broadcasters are afraid to put more women. I think that's now changing, and there's this call for diversity now. But even me as a broadcaster, when I say that I work in sports, when I say that I work in football, people always give me a doubtful look and always ask, oh, am I working in football because I want to meet a footballer to marry them, or do I even know what I'm talking about? So there's this big misconception that women talking about sports usually aren't as credible, or that they just don't know what they're talking about as much. I think that a lot of the broadcasters we see now are ex-players because they do have more credibility, but a man broadcaster who's never been a player is never going to be discredited like a woman. So society really needs to catch up to the reality, which is that women do love sports and they like watching women's sports and men's sports. And if you look, especially across the globe, whether it's in Africa or in South America, a lot of women are the dominant fans. So I think we just need to catch up and put everybody on an equal playing field.
Like I was saying before, when I had that break from playing like professional football or football, I played for my office team. They were really supportive and everything like that, but I turned up to the first game and it took me like 3 weeks to be like, okay, yeah, I'll play with you, because they were in the office and they're like, play, like, come on, play, you're gonna be better than everyone there, like, why would you not? And that little like voice in my head from being a younger girl back in like the 90s playing football would just be there, and I'd be like, oh, and one of my colleagues said, like, when you turn up, I could just tell, like, your hands are in your pockets, you're like sort of casually kicking the ball around, you're thinking, I really don't fancy this. And he was like, but as soon as the ball goes, like, it's just like, it's amazing to play with you and to watch. Like, it's like you can just tell you should be doing this regardless of what you think people think. So there still is that, like, definitely, when like some guys will be like, oh, can we go for a kick around one day, and I'm like, oh, like, no, like, I just want to go back, I want to be like, and I've worked past it, but I wanted to be that, yeah, girl that plays football in football and then outside, like, my own person, because of that always like contradictory sort of like unspoken rules from being a kid. So basically it's a continuous sexism thing.
As with everything, social media is a central hub for opinions, especially with women in sport, which begs the question, is social media a blessing or curse to the advancement of women's sport?
It's more progressive now we've found our community. When we first started, it was nothing but adversity. It's weird because people were telling you no one wants to know, but everyone seemed to want it to know, so they could tell us they didn't care. And so we had this insane amount of people getting in touch just to tell us they didn't care about what we were doing. And that's just someone covering the game. I can't imagine what a player's DMs looks like, or how they feel, walking down the street. These are people that have achieved the biggest things on the biggest stages, and people just go out their way to say I don't care. Well, I don't particularly like golf, but I've never gone out of my way to find a golf player on Twitter and tell him that I don't care what he's doing, because it's impressive. They're incredible people, and I've chosen to showcase that on their behalf.
Because social media in today's age, nothing really escapes social media. Everything is on social media. It's the best way for things to grow. Obviously, you get all these little comments about, oh, women don't belong in football, women can't play as good as men. Like, it's old, it's tired. Social media helps the game grow. Like, with the Women's Champions League final, they had it on YouTube. It was breaking records in France and Germany. Like, social media helps the game grow. Like, it helps everything grow, unfortunately. So I think it's more of a benefit than a hindrance.
I think in terms of hate, like when you get on social media or in the crowds, for me it's something that's in my head. So the way I perceive it is that they're just jealous of what we're doing, they're just jealous of the job that we have, and I know I'm lucky to be in the position that I'm in, so regardless of what they think or what other people think, it doesn't really affect me, because I know I'm doing my family proud, I'm doing the fans proud, and that's all that matters. And the people who comment with hate are people who just want to get you down and just trying to look for something. So
I think social media is what we make it. Like, I hear a lot that social media is bad, and social media is just a platform. Do you know what I mean? It's just a bit of technology, and it's not the platform that is bad. It's the people who use it for bad things and bad purposes. They make it bad. So I actually think there's a lot of benefits to be found using social media if you use it positively. I've used it a lot to network, and it's been really effective and powerful for me. I've made some brilliant connections. I've made, not just in terms of enhancing my career, but also just meaningful connections with real people who have been able to support me through like personal difficult times and things like that. So I think there's, we can use social media to enhance the profile of women's sport and the athletes. Haters gonna hate. There's always going to be people that are going to badmouth something and criticize it. For me, that's not a good enough reason to stop, because I still think the positives can outweigh the negatives.
Senior lecturer Beth Clarkson for the Department of Sports and Exercise Science, alongside Rebecca Syriac, senior lecturer in sports coaching, had been conducting a study on the experiences and the livelihoods of women coaches in football. They paired this also with their personal involvement within the sports coaching career to see whether their experiences have been similar or whether it was an anomaly in the game. Here is what they had to say about what they found through themselves and through those who were a part of their study.
What was interesting when these coaches explained these experiences to us was that they felt that in some instances male colleagues didn't realise or couldn't grasp the importance of the way this sexist banter made them feel. And the word banter came up a lot, and is a way for us to feel ingratiated in the culture of coaching and a way for us to communicate and relate to each other. But this can be taken too far. And a lot of the female coaches we spoke to thought that the male colleagues were perhaps ignorant to these issues, and what could be said as a flippant comment to them was quite hurtful to the female coaches.
So could females be given more of an opportunity to coach in those environments? 100% for me. I think we've got to be confident when we're applying for those jobs. We need to be given the opportunity to be in these environments, and when we get the opportunity to work in these environments, we've got to find a way to stay in. And what I mean by that is the culture in boys football, from my experiences of academy football and girls RTC, regional talent club football, is very, very different. The language used, the relationships, the pressure, the pace, working with boys and being in that kind of culture with guys. As a female, you've got to work out how to navigate that. What language do you want to be used? What would you like your professional identity to be? So I think once we get in as a female coach, it's about trying to navigate, and I don't want to use the word survive, but survive it. And what skill sets do we need to then excel in it?
So it's not just in men's football that women coaches are overlooked for positions. In women's football, looking at the UEFA report statistics, 90% of coaches in Scotland are men, 10% are women. In England, 91% of coaches are men, 9% of coaches are women. And lastly, in Scotland, there's a slightly different story. 54% of coaches are men and 46% of coaches are women.
Sort of, there are less accredited female coaches. Like, I know when they look at the Olympics, often a lot of the coaches across the sports are male. So I don't think it is football's problem. But yes, obviously my experience is as a football coach. I think there's lots of reasons why there are fewer female coaches. I think a lot of women, growing up have had an experience similar to my experiences, where they're basically told at some point in some way that this game is not for you, like you don't have a place here.
A number of barriers to entry for women working in coaching. To start with, when they're getting themselves educated and going on coach education courses, the experiences that women tell us that they're having is quite alarming. The coach education courses that these women attend, they're reported to be intimidating atmospheres where women are treated with hostility and they feel like outsiders. Being called lad is commonplace, and women are reported feeling invisible as a result of some of these comments.
Any female in football, I'd be really surprised if they hadn't experienced some form of sexism. It could be subtle and certainly not intended in that way. And I'll give you an example. Just as a female on the boys' academy circuit, sometimes they don't have female toilets. Sometimes there's nowhere for you to change. They don't have maybe like women's fit kit. Or I've been a coach of a group of players and gone to other clubs, and the guys working in that club have assumed I'm the physio. So there are a number of different ways that might look like in terms of sexism, but you might be subjected to it in a slightly more direct fashion, whether you've been verbally told you're an aggressive female, or get back in the kitchen, or there are 101 things that might happen to you in football. And it's not just potentially on courses or other people. In my role at Watford, sometimes the parents of players can be quite problematic, so I've also had a number of parents at times at different points perhaps question my knowledge as a coach because I am female.
Although it seems there is an unfortunate continuation of sexism within sports and women's football, what can be done by those subjected to it to continue to prosper.
I found that the best way to ignore the sexism is just to ignore it, and even better, prove them wrong. Prove that I am up to the job. Just because I'm a woman, that does not by any measure limit my skill or my skill set. I know that I'm good at what I do and I enjoy doing what I do, so proving people wrong just makes me enjoy the job even more.
Life chose me, I swear. Marge always telling me quit, so I quit telling Marge I was tired of all them stares. It was all do if you dare, so I dared to do, and the rest I put in prayers. Weren't all bad in the bits, had bits that were bad, but bro, it is what it is. Used to tell the G's just think, now we think of the G's, cause they lost to the game, I'm pissed. Then he put his life on the line for the line of his life, now he can't see without the tits. That's just the curse of the gift. In the end, it is what it is. Try and blend in like my blood's not green. Lights always flash like a movie scene. Wanted the shit since about 15, but cause he said quit and jump on Dean. Mic in my hand, they know I'm the champ. Light-hearted, but I ride for the gang. When I'm on top, they'll know I'm the man. Guess they'll all still be ceiling fans. Tell me that you know how it feels. If you know how it feels, then why they give a man air? When I'm the gift and the curse, I was cursed with this gift. This life chose me, I swear. Marge always telling me quit, so I quit telling Marge I was tired of all them stares. It was all do if you dare, so I dared to do, and the rest I put in prayers. Weren't all bad in the bits, had bits that were bad, but bro, it is what it is. Used to tell the G's just think, now we think of the G's, cause they lost to the game, I'm pissed. Then he put his life on the line for the line of his life, now he can't see without the tits. That's just the curse of the gift. In the end, it is what it is.